Did you know that in 1985, the Coca-Cola Company made one of their biggest mistakes in company history by underestimating the status quo bias and naively introducing their New Coke campaign? The company, in an effort to boost sales, decided to reformulate their classic Coca-Cola recipe and introduce a new product called New Coke. However, the status quo bias played a significant role in the public's reaction to the new product. The status quo bias can cause individuals to focus more on the current state of affairs than on the potential benefits of change, leading them to overreact to changes in their status quo. In the case of the New Coke campaign, the status quo bias caused loyal Coca-Cola drinkers to react negatively to the change in the recipe, even though blind taste tests showed that most consumers preferred the taste of New Coke. The backlash was so severe that the Coca-Cola Company was even forced to reintroduce their original formula as Coca-Cola Classic, just a few months after the release of New Coke. The incident remains a cautionary tale of the power of status quo bias in shaping consumer behavior and the importance of considering the psychological impact of changes to beloved products or services. Hey rational rebels! Welcome to the arena of reason, where we train our minds to spot cognitive pitfalls. This is Chris from Critical Conditioning, where we strive for cognitive precision and free our brains from that mental prison. In today's episode, we will be exploring the status quo bias, a tendency to prefer things to stay the same rather than change. We'll be discussing the psychology behind this bias and how it can impact our decision-making processes in everyday life. As always, if you enjoy our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking discussions. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified of our latest uploads. If you would like to support our channel, please consider donating to our PayPal using the link in the description. And lastly, please share this episode with your friends and family, because together, we can all improve our critical thinking skills. Have you ever noticed that you tend to prefer things that are familiar to you, even if they aren't necessarily the best option? That's called the status quo bias, and it affects us all. Let's take a closer look at what the studies say. One study from the University of Chicago looked at retirement savings plans and found that people are more likely to stick with the default contribution rate, even if it's not in their best interest. Have you ever had the chance to adjust your retirement savings plan, but decided to stick with the default rate instead? You're not alone. Another study found that people often choose familiar dishes when it comes to food, even if they're objectively of lesser quality, less healthy, or more expensive than new and unfamiliar options. In fact, some people will even pay triple the price to get their status quo dish or stop going to a restaurant altogether if their favorite dish is no longer on the menu. It just goes to show how the status quo bias can impact our daily lives in ways we may not even realize. But the status quo bias doesn't just affect our personal preferences. It can also have a significant impact on societal norms and policies. For instance, did you know that a survey by the Pew Research Center found that Americans were generally resistant to major changes in the healthcare system, even if they were dissatisfied with the current system? That's a clear example of how the status quo bias can affect larger societal issues. So, it's important to be aware of this bias and try to make more informed decisions, even if it means stepping outside of your comfort zone. I got a quick question for you guys. Have you ever witnessed someone falling victim to the status quo bias, to their detriment? How did it impact their life or the situation at hand? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. The status quo bias affects everyone to some degree, but individual differences exist in how susceptible people are to this phenomenon. One surprising finding is that highly educated people may be more susceptible to the status quo bias. This may be because they have invested a great deal of time and effort into their beliefs and are less likely to change them, even when presented with new evidence. Another fascinating difference is the role of personality traits. For example, individuals who score high on the personality trait of openness to experience tend to be less affected by the status quo bias. Their willingness to try new things and explore new options makes them less likely to stick with familiar choices. Studies have also shown that age can influence susceptibility to the status quo bias. Older adults tend to be more resistant to change and more likely to stick with familiar options. Income level is also a factor, as those with lower incomes are more willing to try new options if they perceive a potential benefit. Interestingly, gender can also play a role in susceptibility to the status quo bias. A study found that women were more likely to stick with the status quo when it came to job choices, while men were more likely to take risks and pursue new opportunities. Understanding these individual differences can assist individuals and organizations in making more informed decisions and avoiding the limitations of the status quo bias. Status quo fun fact: did you know that the status quo bias can also affect our perceptions of music? In a study conducted by a music streaming service, it was found that people were more likely to listen to songs that they were already familiar with, even if they find them boring or not enjoyable, than new, unknown songs. Interestingly, this effect applies to music but seemingly not to shows and movies. Let's hear your opinion, guys. What do you think? Is the status quo bias more of a help or a hindrance in our society? Are we too resistant to change and missing out on potential progress, or are we wisely sticking with what works and avoiding unnecessary risks? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to read what others are saying. Also, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future debates and discussions. The status quo bias is all around us, and it affects our daily lives in many ways that we may not even realize. Here are some examples of how the status quo bias impacts us in our everyday lives. Sticking to the same brand: many of us stay loyal to the same brand of products, even if they've gotten more expensive or no longer fit our needs. For instance, you might keep buying from a company you used to love, even if their products have changed for the worse or their values no longer align with yours. Sticking with outdated styles: we sometimes get stuck in our ways when it comes to clothes and hairstyles, wearing the same old thing even if it's out of date or doesn't suit us anymore. Eating the same food: we can also fall victim to the status quo bias when it comes to our eating habits. Even when our doctor tells us that certain foods aren't good for us, we might keep eating them simply because we're used to them. Investing in the same things: finally, we might keep investing in the same stocks or funds, even if they've consistently underperformed in the past. Here are some more quick examples. Sticking to the same route to work, even if there's a better way to get there. Refusing to try new technology or software that could make life easier. Choosing to live in the same neighborhood or city, even if there are better, cheaper opportunities elsewhere. Using the same study or work methods, even if they haven't worked in the past or outdated or even dangerous. Keeping the same group of friends, even if the relationship is no longer fulfilling or healthy. Holding on to old beliefs and values, even if they no longer help us grow and develop. Understanding how the status quo bias impacts our daily lives is the first step towards combating it, and to do so, it's important to know how to spot it in ourselves and others, and what strategies can be used to overcome it. So, how to spot the status quo bias? To spot the status quo bias in yourself and others, you can ask questions like, why do we do things this way, or what are the reasons for sticking with this option? If the answer is, because we've always done it this way, or it's just easier, then it's likely the status quo bias at play. To overcome it, you can try to challenge your assumptions and ask yourself if there are better options available. You can also seek out different perspectives and consider alternatives to the usual choices. It can be helpful to regularly evaluate your habits and choices to see if they still align with your current goals and values. One proven method to avoid falling victim to the status quo bias is to embrace a growth mindset. This involves actively seeking out new experiences, learning opportunities, and challenges. It encourages a willingness to take risks and try new things, which can help break out of old patterns and habits. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Critical Conditioning, where we help you strengthen your mind's analytical skills and avoid cognitive pitfalls. Today's episode was all about the status quo bias, and how it affects our daily lives in ways we may not even realize. I hope this episode has given you some valuable insights and tools to overcome this bias and make better decisions in your life. If you found this episode helpful, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And if you really want to support our mission to help people think critically and rationally, please consider donating to our PayPal using the link in the description below. Your contribution will help us create more quality content and reach more people with our message. So, if you found value in this episode and want to help us keep going, please donate whatever you can. Every little bit counts. And remember, keep your mind sharp, rational rebels, until the next time we meet in the arena of reason. This is Chris from Critical Conditioning signing off.